Okay, so this is the fourth video. All right, so this is just going to go over the readings themselves. All right, so this is sort of the logic of how I organize this, and this is sort of based off of Robert Rules of Orders of how you organize like meetings and whatnot. So then you'll notice that you have the date and the week. So it's August 26th for this week 1, week 2, September 2nd. Oh, and then if you have a class on Monday, it's Labor Day, so there's no class. Okay. Um, so then this is sort of the logic. So it's week 1, and this is what the numbers mean. So it's week 1, Tuesday, right? So we're only um technically meeting once a week when I post the modules on Tuesday. So this is sort of what um you're doing this week. Language and society. Does syntax, language, and ideology shape our understanding of society? And that's sort of what you're doing with the modules, all right? And then the video of, sorry, and then reviewing the syllabus. Sorry about that. Okay. And then you do have one assignment, and then this is for the first module. The first Canvas module will be an icebreaker, and will provide an overview of what the course will cover for the semester. All right, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then next week, when I post the module, and these readings, I believe I already posted them by Maurice Merleau-Ponty and Ferdinand de Saussure. So Merleau-Ponty is a French philosopher, and he's a phenomenologist, which is like a very particular subfield of of philosophy. And so phenomenologists are philosophers that try to understand how people understand their reality. So in this book, The Visible and Invisible is just sort of talking about how we need to learn how to see things, because if you've taken like a introduction to sociology, your sociology professor in that course should have mentioned that socialization is the first thing that you learn about, and that socialization happens through the family, the interactions between the parents, siblings, other family members, and community members. And through socialization, we learn how to walk and talk, right, or walk and speak. But then what tends to be forgotten, and Merleau-Ponty reminds us in this book, that we are also socialized on how to see things. So if you're raised in a family and live in a community that's well to do, those experiences and how you see things and understand things are going to be completely different from someone who lives in the hood, because of the life experiences and the things that you see every day. So then your circumstances in some ways do determine not only how you speak, but it also determines in certain ways how you see things and how you understand those things and how those things relate to your ideas that happen out in society. All right. So then that's why I'm having you read Merleau-Ponty as well as Fernand de Saussure, which he is credited with modernizing sociolinguistics with the general principles, or sorry, the course in general linguistics. Because one of the arguments that Fernand de Saussure makes is that words unto themselves mean nothing. Yeah, they might have a definition for what the dictionary may say, but that doesn't really give the word meaning to it. The thing that really gives meaning to words is putting words in relationship to each other, right? And then if you want to even take it a step further, how do words that we use are able to reflect the reality that you observe that is outside of your influence or outside of your control, right? So then the first week we're going to be you're going to be reading about the idea of language and vision, and then I will also have the modules and assignments, and I will explain what those assignments are, right? And then September 3rd, 9th, or week 3, developing critical thinking skills. So we're going to start looking at Richard, Paul, and Linda Elder, and how they look at the idea of what is critical thinking and how they define it, right? And then here you will notice that on September 9th, I'm asking you to start thinking about, and you can even do it now if you like, think about what essay that you're going to submit to me for the peer editing exercise. So I really want to do this early so then I could also review the essays and make sure that they meet the minimum criteria, that they're at least 5 pages long and it has like they're double spaced. But as I mentioned in the prior video, your essay does not necessarily have to be a sociology essay. It could be any course that you've taken either at Dominguez Hills, or if you're a new transfer student, and a 5 page essay that you wrote from the junior college that you transferred from. All right. And if you're still uncertain or still don't have one, send me an email so we could talk about it. Okay. All right. So then that's for week 3. And then on week 4 or September 16th, we're going to start looking at learning about sociological inquiries and who is your audience. So we're going to look at Richard Paul or Paul and Elder, and then Wayne Booth and et al. About, thinking in print and connecting with your reader. And then on September 23rd or week 5, we're going to start prepping for the editing exercise. So we're going to review Paul and Elder, the about the theory of writing, the practice of writing, and looking at their appendices. Because on this week, what you're going to do is that once you submit your essay to me and I assign it to you this week, you're going to have at least a week or two or so to be able to assess the paper. So then, and then you're going to write down your notes of your assessment of the paper. And the way that I want you to organize the assessment or your notes is based on what I wrote here. To take notes on the things, because the notes are going to help you to become familiar with the essay that I assigned to you. Okay. So then things that you could look at in terms of how to organize your essay in terms thematically is you could look at punctuation, word selection, word agreement, the logic of argument, the presentation of ideas, evidence utilized, and so forth. So what this exercise or what these notes are doing is to encourage you to think about the writing process and consider what is your writing process, and how do you think about it, and how do you use those ideas about the writing process to evaluate someone else's writing. All right, so there's a certain logic or madness to this logic, or logic to this madness. And it might seem like busy work, but this is important work, because if you do plan to continue your education and get a master's or a PhD or a law degree or MBA, this is the type of work, or this is how you start your initial work to become familiar with a certain topic, to develop your competency and your command of the topic. All right, so like that's what the notes are for. So then you're going to submit that to me on the 28th, which is a Sunday. But then this is just reminding you that this is based on the essay that you submitted to me on September 9th, which is this week right here. Okay. And then once you're done with that, and then on September 30th, this is when you're going to actually do the peer editing. So then the week prior, I'm going to submit onto Canvas the outline or the prompt that you're going to use to do the note taking as well as the eventual editing. But I'm also going to include um, which course materials you will utilize to be able to help you to complete this particular exercise. All right. So, like, if you notice and pay attention, I am not suggesting for you to use any of the materials for the note taking. That is only just using the assigned essay that I assigned to you, nothing else. All right. So, you could sort of consider it as like a raw assessment, right? Initial assessment of your note taking. And that's going to help you prepare for your editing exercise on September 30th, right? And then you're going to submit that to me by October 5th, which is a Sunday. And then the following week, you're going to do the peer reflexive essay. And again, I'm going to provide you with a handout, a YouTube a tutorial on how you're going to go about doing this. So then these 2 weeks or so is just going to be focusing doing those two exercises, right? And then once we're done with that, then we're going to start focusing more on, again, looking at writing, but also beginning the research process, and then how to be able to select a topic from a source like a newspaper or some other media out there, and to be able to become competent and be able to present yourself as an authority figure on that particular topic. And then from there, we're gonna go October 21st on week 9, shaping your research and your topic types of academic writing. And this is where I'm going to give you some examples of like writing from history, maybe a history class or literary class or an English class, and compare it to a sociology class in terms of writing. Okay. And then from there on week 10, and this is like every student's nightmare, that there's just too much to read and so little time. So then you're just going to read this one chapter by Howard Becker about terrorized by the literature and how to deal and manage readings when you're doing research. And then once we're done with that on September 21st, on October 28th, November 4th, week 11, starting a conversation with existing literature. And what that means is that when you're writing, you're not only writing or using your sources just as a way to support your claims, but then also is like how you engage the ideas of the writer. Like, do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Do you think their ideas are satisfactory in relationship to the type of evidence that do they use, or do you think if you introduce some other type of evidence, would it change the argument or the position? Because this is what you learn when you're in graduate school, and you don't necessarily get this much exposure to this type of thinking processes with some of like other classes, because it's more of just being able to understand the basic information, right? But like mentioned earlier, I'm trying to put you in a position where you're able to consider going to graduate school and hopefully succeeding and doing well and going on your future career goals. All right, so then from November 4th and week 11 or week 12, November 11th to week 12, looking at how to make good arguments, right? Because sometimes when you're in the middle of writing like course papers for your courses, you're like in midterm week or finals week, and it just becomes like too much, and sometimes students don't necessarily pay attention to their writing, right? So you need to be able to develop an argument and how to develop a narrative that is consistent with what you want to convey to your reader, right? And also that it makes sense, right? Okay, and then from November 11th, week 12, we go to November 18th, week 13, and we're looking at how to support claims. Because one of the biggest criticisms that I've had with essays from students is that students tend not to use empirical evidence to support claims. If you do not use empirical evidence to support your claim, it's only a claim and it's only opinion, or a what was it? The word just slipped my mind. Um, I can't think of the word now. Speculation. There you go. Or that your essay is just speculation and it is not sociological. Right. So you need to understand what is considered empirical evidence and how do you make that connection to your argument to ensure and to have your reader consider you as a legitimate, reliable writer and thinker. Which goes back to what I mentioned earlier. If you're unable to effectively convey your ideas through writing, that does impact how people see you as an academic or even as a student. the better you are at effectively writing and conveying your ideas, not only verbally, but more specifically in writing, will help you be able to succeed in academia. And especially if you want to try to get a letter of recommendation from that professor. Because, and we could talk about this, or I could mention it more like through the videos throughout the semester. If you ask a professor for a letter recommendation, they are under no obligation to write you a positive letter. But you will never know because once you apply for a graduate program, you have to sign a waiver. And that waiver is just basically saying that you surrender your rights to be able to review your file. So if you get denied, you could call the department and they may tell you, but more likely they won't tell you why you were denied. They'll just say that you didn't make the cut for whatever reason or give no reason at all. Okay, so hopefully I that makes sense. Yeah, and I just realized that I copied this one chapter twice, so I'll fix that. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, but I'll fix that. So then yeah, so then that's why it's important to be able to support your claims with empirical evidence, right? Because again, this is a social scientific course and you're majoring in a social scientific discipline. So since it is a science, you need empirical evidence. Right. And we will be again, we'll be talking about how to be able to integrate that evidence in your essays. And then on November 25th, just before, or this, I think, believe is Thanksgiving weekend, is like how to start putting all this together by how to make sense of it all and how to organize your paper or your draft, how to organize your argument and how to go about writing it. Because this chapter right here, One Right Way, is a misleading chapter because there's actually multiple ways of how you could write an essay. It just depends on what your goal is. And you need to be able to follow that goal faithfully to be able to successfully write a composition that is nicely written, comprehended well, and then evaluated in the most favorable way possible. Okay. So then that's sort of the goal that I have set out for the course to be able to get you to that point. Okay. And then after Thanksgiving break, making connections, so this is also and just like another intervention of how to be able to incorporate sources effectively in your writing. And then on December 9th, which is the last week of official instruction, being able to develop a sociological narrative, meaning how do you put all this stuff together that makes sense and that it is a well constructed sociological argument based on whatever topic you had selected. All right. And then December 16th or week 17 is finals week. So then you'll have that week to finish writing your proposal and then and as well as submitting your final recorded presentation on your research proposal. Okay. Now let me. Yeah. So then that's what this. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So this is pretty much the different themes and the different things that we're gonna go through throughout the semester. So I'm going to stop it here, and what I'm gonna do next is just do two more videos. One video is just reviewing the first assignment, and then the second video is just reviewing the discussion board, which is more like an icebreaker. Okay. So I'm gonna stop it and I'll be back in a minute.